So, let's say there is an increase, in this case, there's an increase in the markup, okay? Now, as I said, when the markup increase, that means the ratio of 1/1 plus m, or mu, will decline, because if mu increase, that means the denominator goes up, and that means the ratio goes down. So if the denominator goes down, you see what happens. Unemployment will go up, because the original equilibrium is A, and what happens is that it will move from A to A prime, and that leads to higher unemployment. So now let's talk about the minimum wage, as we discussed earlier. Depending on where are you at this moment, if you are, I explained to you earlier, if you are now in the equilibrium, an ideal equilibrium position, what does it mean, ideal equilibrium position? That means the worker is already well paid, okay, and the level of unemployment is very low, okay. If you are in that position, and let's assume that the firm or the producers trying to increase that markup, okay, then this is what happened. The equilibrium moves from A to A prime. What does that mean? That means the rate of unemployment goes up. Okay? So, that leads to the question, so, that means if minimum wages is imposed, unemployment tends to go up. Because minimum wage is almost like costs, right? So if the minimum wage is raised, then there is a possibility that the firm will hire less number of people. And less number of people hired means higher unemployment. Okay? So that is the general story. Now, but one thing that is missing in all the story is what happened with labor productivity. So in other words, let's say the labor initially paid 100, but then that labor is working harder and more productive. Harder is not necessarily, more sweat, effort, but also using brain, using initiative and so on. That means he or she is becoming more productive. And yet, if he receives salary still 100, productivity is increasing, but wages does not increase. What does that mean? Okay? So that means there is a gap between what the worker is supposed to receive and what the workers contributes. And the contribution is productivity, the labor productivity. So that is the one principle that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to analyze the minimum wage. The second is that, as I said earlier, what is the current level of minimum wage? If the current level of minimum wage is very low or too low, then if you increase the minimum wage, imagine there is a great possibility that those workers may work harder or may become productive for whatever reasons. Okay, maybe they are happier, psychologically. When you are happier as a human being, you can work more productively. So if that is the case, then increasing the minimum wage will improve the labor productivity, and improve labor productivity will lead to higher output. Okay, so, and higher output means less unemployment. So you can see here, it all depends on where is the current position of the minimum wage. Now let's think about the other scenario. Suppose the level of wage is already high, and the minimum wage is already high. High means it's enough for the workers to survive and to live with the family and so forth. Okay. And if that position is changed by forcing the minimum wage to go up even further, put yourself in the shoes of the firms. Then the firms has the incentive to lay off the workers, because if the minimum wage is already high and then they push further the minimum wage, then maybe the company is reluctant to hire, or maybe the company will think to switch to, other machinery that can replace the labor. At the extreme, maybe they're going to use robots rather than the laborers and so forth. So there are two cases here, two extremes. One extreme is that the current minimum wage is too low, and if that is the case, raising the minimum wage is good, because it leads to higher productivity and leads to higher output and leads to lower unemployment. So the entire welfare of the country will improve. But if think about Europe, okay, because as I said earlier, the minimum wage in Europe is already very high. Now, if they keep pushing the minimum wage higher, then there is a possibility that the output, the GDP of the country will slow down, and as a result, unemployment will go up. Now, let me go back to, I didn't catch who asked the questions about minimum wage earlier. Is this clear now, the explanation about the role of minimum wage? By the way, your question is about labor union, which is similar, because if you have a stronger labor union, essentially you are in a position to ask for higher minimum wage. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is that clear?
Yes, obviously.
All right. Now, of course, it's easy for us to discuss about minimum wage in a classroom like this, okay? But in reality, the big question is really, what is enough? Because remember, I said it all depends on the current level of the minimum wage. Is the current level of minimum wage enough or not? So that is really the difficult part on the ground. So in reality, that is the source of contentions here, okay? But the concept is very clear. If it is too low, then raising the minimum wage is good, because you make the workers more productive, and that is good for the economy, not only for the welfare of the worker, but also for the entire economy. But if the minimum wage is already high, then like what happened in Europe, the unemployment rate tends to be high if they keep pushing for higher minimum wage. Now, is there any ballpark figure? What is the so-called enough or sufficient level of the minimum wage? Yes. Yes.
I was curious about, can we set the minimum wage in the equilibrium point where wage setting and price setting is equal? Is it good or bad?
If the question is can we, theoretically we can, but I just mentioned in practice on the ground it's very difficult, because in practice on the ground, if you are the workers, you argue that the wage setting equation is different compared to if you are the firm owners. Okay, so conceptually the answer to your question, yes, you can. And that's the reason why I give you remember the first example, this one. So this is the level, this is the ideal level. So this is the ideal level of unemployment here. And that's why when you are in this position, okay, if, for example, you try to go up further, then the wage setting curve will shift up, then the unemployment will go up, if that is the case, okay? So, yes, the answer is possible. It is possible to determine this level of equilibrium here. And I was about to say earlier, is there any sort of rule of thumb? What is enough minimum wage? Well, there is no God-given rule here, and there is no academic kind of explanation in terms of what is the enough level of the minimum wage. But usually they're talking about, something like between 25% and 50% of the average wage. So let's say if the average wage in Indonesia is let's say 500, okay, this is the average wage for all workers, okay. If it is 500, then the minimum wage is between 25% to 50% of that. But that is not scientific, and that is not God-given number.